In terms of surveillance, in terms of evasion of surveillance, our weapons are now as good as theirs. What does that mean for us? This is a big deal.
You are your own worst adversary because cypherpunk future is now. It's just not equally distributed.
In the sovereign individual, there is this prediction that the asymmetry of tooling between the state and the individual is going to be reduced dramatically through the invention of new technologies. The power to secure your wealth was something that was almost exclusively reduced to the elites, and now that power was returned to the individual with Bitcoin and with AI.
There's this thing with AI, and it could be the greatest thing for human freedom ever.
You can use the AI to effectively DDoS government.
Hello, welcome to BTC Prague. We'll have some great conversation today because we gotta talk more about the cypherpunk tips on how we can actually live a freer life. And I think it all starts with mindset fundamentally and your worldview. So Paul, what are some tips in this regard you can give?
You know, one of the most important things is a practical matter with dealing with cypherpunk and staying out of view and things like that is to begin practicing it early. Start right away. If you have to start small because you are going to make mistakes. This is not something we grow up learning. Okay, so learning how to, let's take simple physical things. Learn how to move through a crowd without being tracked. Learn how to exchange things with people without being tracked. Learn how to know when you're being followed. These are things you really don't have to use most of the time, but you want to have them somewhere. When you want to use certain types of encryption, start small. Don't do your first time using some new encryption to transfer 10 Bitcoins. To do something scary, start with something easy that if you screw up, the world doesn't end. So start small, start early, because you're going to make mistakes along the way somewhere. And you have to know what it feels like when you're, to take your baby steps before you take your big steps. So as far as I'm concerned, as a practical matter, that's really important. Just start. Wherever you can, just start. And you'll get used to it. And after a while, it'll become easy for you. And you won't freak out when you do something. And if you're going to do, one of the great things about digital currencies is that if you're new to it, and people my age, you're afraid to hit the button on the computer because you might break something. It might break if I do it wrong. Then send $10 worth and just see if it works. Because you can go super fine. So send $10 worth and see how it goes. Then send $100 worth and see how it goes. Then send 1,000. And as pretty soon you waste a little bit of money on the transfers, but that's okay because the time you get 3 or 4 transactions done, now you've got it. You're going to be okay. So start small, start early, and you'll be much happier as you go.
Yeah, for me, it's do it with people you like, And I think in this setting, you can find like-minded people. Like I found my BTC Pay crew hanging out over there. And just as you spend time with like-minded people and do cool stuff together, you will naturally gravitate towards better outcomes. So that would be my tip. Spend time with BTC Pay server team. Spend time with Francis, Pablo Escobar of Bitcoin. So,
yeah, Paul made a really good point, which is to start small. So a few years ago, I was very black-pilled about my own privacy. I used to think, well, Google already owns me. I'm already tracked. It's not worth it to do any effort. And then I actually changed my mind to say that it's easy to think that there's nothing you can do because we're already tracked. So taking very small steps, it's important to remember that you don't have to become like Jason Bourne in order to take back your sovereignty, where you're fully off the grid, you have 6 passports, you have a private jet, you're using, mesh network communications only. There's like small concrete steps. And then you start with the easiest one. So, switch from Telegram to Signal, start self-hosting some of your software, just taking incremental steps. And of course, the easiest, start with the low-hanging fruits. The low-hanging fruit is obviously Bitcoin. So the number one tip is just start by withdrawing Bitcoin to self-custody. I know it sounds obvious to a lot of people, but maybe not for everyone. And yeah, so small incremental steps. And the idea is to not put yourself as the low-hanging fruit. So you'll never be a Jason Bourne, but just you kind of like, you don't need to outrun the bear. You just need to outrun the other guy. So just make sure that your security is better than your peers. Another thing also is, as cypherpunks, we tend to think a lot about just using technology, but I think another thing that you may want to think about is becoming a legal hacker. So becoming very interested in different types of laws and understanding how the laws work and understanding how to use the laws to your advantage, how to find loopholes in the laws. That's very important. So there's no way that we can avoid being in a jurisdiction when there is no law at all. So even if you are a full cypherpunk and you have all of your shit together in terms of software, you're still operating in a physical jurisdiction. So paying attention to the law and understanding it is critical.
Yeah, for me, I'm probably on the spectrum of this panel the most retarded when it comes to personal security and privacy. I'm much more of a YOLO person at the moment. Privacy is one part of human freedom, I would say. And at the moment, there's this thing with AI, and it could be the greatest thing for human freedom ever. And so I'm very deep into AI, and I'm letting it read all my emails, because if it didn't, I wouldn't read. I'm not reading them. so that's where I'm at the moment. I think that you take simple steps and you build a solid foundation, and then you take calculated risks, right? When you're giving over your information, you're just always giving it over. It's like, I am going to give this information over to this one company. I've looked at them, and I think the risk is worth the reward here. And so just be take calculated risks. Number one thing I got a second is while you're taking these calculated risks, do not make that calculated risk with your net worth. You cannot have your money on an exchange. The only place you can take calculated risks from is a place where you have your money not on any digital system, which is kind of ironic because Bitcoin is like digital money, but it's the only one that doesn't have to be on a computer, actually, nowadays. It's the only thing you can take fully offline, but also bring it through the airport and not worry about it being confiscated, and also not have it in your house. As well. So yeah, I think that's step one, solid foundation, take calculated risks on top of that.
Yeah, but I just wanted to jump in there because it's so unfortunate that we live in a world where you need to give away your privacy, your information, even now to use AI with this latest, what is Mythos, Fable, the whole Claude 5. If you switch to that model, they now automatically keep all your data, all your inquiry days, whether you opt in or didn't opt in. And convenience is such an enemy of privacy. And again, it's, to me, terrible that we're living in a world where you need to give away pieces of yourself in order to stay afloat with current demands of society. And, it's demeaning enough to have a LinkedIn account or even X account, like most of us have. But the fact that now, most people are using AI with their first name, last name. They don't even have a separate email. And they're giving away all this data to big corporations, tech companies in US, who are then profiting on their data and using it to build better and better models while not paying people anything. People are paying them for the privilege to, disclose their private life. I just think it's terrible. And this is where freedom tech, I'm really hoping what's being done with Nostr, with Bitcoin, with nonprofit efforts like OpenSats, HRF that are funding. I really hope, we stay ahead of this because, I don't want to live in that world. And more than me, I don't want to live in the world where people's children are forced to use these systems in such a way. It's just terrible enough to have kids on TikTok, let alone kids that are feeding their data to AI since they're 6 or something.
I want to just add something about AI. We really just we jumped a real serious hazard just in the last couple of years. In the States, which of course is where a lot of this stuff has a lot of its input, where there's a lot going on in the States that seems somehow to bleed to everywhere else. There was a real risk 2-3 years ago that AI was going to be centralized. And centralized AI is terrifying. It's a horrible prospect. But what happened is the people who were doing that pushed too hard too fast, and they scared the guys from Silicon Valley. And if you've ever seen, how many have seen the Mark Andreessen thing where he talked about it? Oh, not too many. Okay, well, let me tell you what happened. There's a big venture capital guy out of California named Mark Andreessen. And he's been involved in all sorts of these things. He's involved in setting up various AI ventures. He's been around a long time. And he went for a meeting at the White House, 2024, I think, 23 maybe. I think it's 24, whatever, in that era. And they sat him down and said, look, there's going to be 2 or 3 AI companies, and that's all. Don't try to set up other ones. We will kill them. There's going to be 2 or 3 AI companies, and they're going to all answer to us, and this is what's going to happen. And I don't think this guy is, I don't know him. I don't think he's particularly a free market anarchist type or anything like that. A little bit libertarian, I think. But anyhow, it scared the hell out of him. And a lot of the people in Silicon Valley switched their donations from left to right because of it. And now we have a wide open competitive model for AI. The White House has called these guys in under the new group there and said, look, you've got to build your own power generation. You've got to get your own water, because if you don't, people's energy bills are going to go way up and they're going to get really ticked off. So part of your plans, you have to get your own water. You have to generate your own electricity. And they all said, sure, we'll do that. No problem. You'll let us do what we want? We'll do it. So we now have a competitive environment for AI. This is super important to us. Now it's a mess, and it's almost going to be a mess. Okay, we don't look for pristine, because we're not going to get it. Okay, it's going to be a mess, and some of them are going to go broke, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's always going to be sloppy. But now we have a free market in AI. Yeah, that's partly regulated, partly okay, it's sloppy. Okay, but you get the idea. It's pretty much a free market, and all these people can compete, and it's not centralized AI. This is a big deal. We just got past a major step. And you guys, some of you guys can talk about the power of AI to burn through regulations, to burn through all sorts of things. You guys can talk about this with more detail than I can. But in terms of surveillance, in terms of evasion of surveillance, in terms of these things, our weapons are now as good as theirs. What does that mean for us? This is a big deal. Okay, maybe they're 6 months ahead on this or something. Doesn't matter. The AI agents prefer Bitcoin because it's much easier. And not just the people using it, the agents themselves. They, make me an efficient transfer method. Well, what's the best way? It's Bitcoin. It works. So there's a lot going on in this whole realm that is really, really good for us. And really, we got very lucky. However you want to describe that, we just did. And now we've got an actual sloppy free market in AI. And wow, the skies are turning blue. I mean, the world is full of outrage engines these days because it pays to make people upset. Forget about us. We're going to be okay. Sloppy, difficult, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, this is part of the mindset, right? Like there's so much privacy doom. Oh, we're all losing our privacy. AI will take over the world. And if you stay in that mindset, then you will continue to be depressed. But there is an alternative side to this. We have an incredible amount of cypherpunk technologies to protect strong privacy for anyone who would like to use them at really affordable rates. And that includes AI and other things. So check your mindset first. But then don't be naive, right? There are actual adversaries out there. There are people who try to steal from you. And so maybe we can go through actually talking about specific types of adversaries, but then also what are the tools that we have so that we can stop them.
I would say you are your own worst adversary, because cypherpunk future is now. It's just not equally distributed. And you can see that very well in Bitcoiners that, I don't know, bought 1,000 Bitcoin back in the day of Silk Road. And, you know, they had 500 Bitcoin left. So in 2020, they woke up, they're like, oh, well, I guess I'm retired. I'm off grid now, right? I don't need to participate in the whole rat race and games. So really, it's what you say, Max. It's for all of us to choose to start using cypherpunk technologies and like even start using Signal, something that's mainstream, that's becoming mainstream, that funny enough, even like politicians in US are using between themselves to plan their goddamn attacks and bombing on certain parts of the world against regulation. But what you can do with that? So for me, it's just, again, find your group, start using cypherpunk technologies, and free yourself. Like,
I think identifying the adversary and your specific threat model is critically important. It's the first place to start. There are some adversaries that, no matter how hard we try, we're probably not going to be able to evade them or to protect ourselves against them, specifically like the NSA. If the NSA wants to find you, and they really care about finding you, it doesn't really matter if you're using Graphene OS, or it doesn't really matter if you're hiding your trace. They'll probably find a way to track you. But the NSA is not everybody's threat model. The threat model is very different. It's usually some petty little bureaucrat in your own country. It might be some vindictive, tax agent. It might be your HOA representative. It might be your business partners, your wife. Most cases, your adversary is going to be other individuals that are trying to extort you, steal from you, kidnap you. You kidnap your family. So it's all about finding your appropriate level of threat model. And just to reiterate the point, it doesn't matter if you can't protect yourself from the NSA, because that's the highest level. It's just to start low. And Paul said something like really awesome, which is the reduction of asymmetry between the power of the state and the power of an individual. So the title of this talk, for example, Thriving in the Digital Panopticon, is very similar to the title of the book, The Sovereign Individual, which is thriving in the information age. And in The Sovereign Individual, there is this, I want to say prophecy, but this prediction that the asymmetry of tooling between the state and the individual is going to be reduced dramatically through the invention of new technologies. The gunpowder is a very good example of that. Before the invention of gunpowder, the state was asserting its dominance through massive economies of scale, knights that have a lot of armor and that have horses. It's very expensive. And now with the invention of gunpowder, any random peasant with a pistol is now as lethal as, a full-blown knight with, expensive armor. And then we saw a first reduction of this asymmetry with the emergence of Bitcoin. The power to secure your wealth was something that was almost exclusively reduced to the elites, which were able to set up shell corporations and offshore companies elsewhere and control banks. And now that power was returned to the individual with Bitcoin. And with AI, I see, and Paul said something really funny, which is, imagine what you can do with AI against a bureaucrat, which is asking you to fill like 11 different forms in order to open a restaurant. And it is true that the governments have more advanced AI that we do, but I think it's still like the NSA, it's still like the DHS, whereas like the random little bureaucrat that is the actual threat model to you, the little petty tyrant that is making your life hell, they don't have access to these kinds of special AIs. I don't even think they use AI at all still. I think the unions are going to be preventing them from implementing AI. So using AI to advantage is like really, really phenomenal. You can use the AI to effectively DDoS the government. So yeah, it's about understanding the emergence of these technologies and recognizing that we have not a short window, but we have a window where we have a power as individuals that is equal to the power that the state is able to accumulate through this mass economy of scale with these technologies and leveraging them to your advantage.
Yeah, there's a lot of optimistic points there. I think there's so many little opportunities for people, especially if you can wield the tools to sidestep a lot of the dysfunction that is also being caused by the tools. One thing that I think is super important to be aware of is things in some ways are getting better. Obviously, in some ways are getting much, much worse, right? So with this data that's being stored now, everything's, obviously we're into the digital age, we're in information age, but now we're in the AI age. And what's happening is just, the amount of data that is being stored about you is just increasing. The more you use the tools, especially if they're not, sovereign tools, the amount of data that's being stored about you is increasing by corporations and by the governments. You're all Bitcoiners in this room today, and governments want to know more about you. As the Bitcoin price goes up, they want to get more information about you. You've seen this happen in France, where they've been collecting data on Bitcoiners and cryptocurrency holders, and that data has been sold to criminals. On the other side, the criminals are also taking data from private companies. Like this Walleto service provider, which does tax accounting for crypto holders so they can honestly submit their tax to the government, who is on the other side selling it to criminals. And also Walleto is being hacked. And so criminals have both channels. The government and the surveillance capitalism are both, they're both collecting information about you, and that information is both going, the only people who have both those channels are the criminals, right? And so you're, like you said, you've got to know your adversary. More increasingly, I mean, governments take a lot of Bitcoin through taxes. I don't know what we're going to do about that, but more and more Bitcoin is being taken by criminals who just access that data from governments and corporations. It comes up with people calling you up and people doing scams and phishing. Probably there's several people who've already in this room been victim of it because this happens so often. More often, they're targeting people in their own homes. That's a thing that's increasing. And actually, one interesting thing I've noticed by looking at this is that hackers who might get access to your Gmail or your Uber Eats account or whatever, normally they would use that to try and hack exchanges, right? Almost always. They would use that to try and get onto your exchange and take your money from the exchange. You probably have to deal with that all the time, right? But now sometimes what they're doing is they're just using it to monitor you. They're just saying, I've got that person's Gmail and I can see every time they order food. I can see every time they go anywhere. And what they're using that information to appear as an Uber Eats driver at your house when you've just ordered something, and then using that to break in. So keep your data secure. I think you use two-factor authentication, something I've learned. I've actually recently had my Gmail hacked. It's a long story, but get people. You might think your Gmail doesn't have that much interesting about you, but people who get into it will use it against you. Absolutely, they'll find a way, especially if you're a Bitcoiner. And so, you just lock down all your stuff, even if it's once again, calculated risks. Like, yes, you're giving a corporation access to your data to achieve some goal. You know what the goal is, but don't let anyone else have access to that data, right? Just keep it narrow and try and use reputation, use judgment. People who keep leaking their data. I mean, Bitcoin exchanges and other Bitcoin service providers, they do not hold your personal data with the same rigor that they hold the Bitcoin. And or the same rigor that you would expect of them. Just that's in general. Exceptions for you, of course, but in general, that's just the case. So try to minimize service providers and make judgments based on them. Like use reputation, like do some research, and just sign up to flashy web forms all the time. Yeah.
No, that's exactly the main point that I'm trying to make, and why I take my own privacy so seriously, and hopefully inspiring other cypherpunks to do the same, is because in this world that we're living in, you're monitored just by act of existing, and data about you is being collected either with your consent or without it. Having a Google account. You're having a Google account to have email, to communicate with people. You have certain goals, but once you reach those goals, see if you can archive that account. You don't need to delete all of your emails, but do you really need emails from 5 years ago? Could you connect over POP3 and download those emails from Google? It's because if someone has your private information, they have piece of you, and you do not want to be in position where there is so much of you outside of your home, of your, where you exist. You don't want pieces of you scattered all over the world on servers of various corporations, because moment will come when, especially as AI improves, where that data can be taken away from you. It's like, how many of you here have gotten a message from Martin, organizer of BTC Prague, over Telegram? I got it, you got. So yeah, North Koreans hacked Martin. So now all the speakers are getting messages from that account. And it's something that we're reaching out to Telegram, but they're not blocking that account. So it's a huge issue that simply do not let pieces of you be scattered around the world. Take control of your privacy, take control of your data.
A very practical tip that I can give, bouncing off of what you said, is a lot of Bitcoiners understand a concept which is called the decoy wallet. So a decoy wallet is basically if ever you get kidnapped, and the kidnapper or mugged or something, and they say open your wallet, you can actually have a secret pin in one of your wallets that opens up an alternative wallet. So you assume that someone is going to access your data, and you create a decoy wallet to give them, and you can think about your identity and your residential address as in the same light, where if you take the view that your data will inevitably get leaked by either the French government, which has, by the way, in Europe, there has been 984 million accounts leaked. And this year, I think we are at about 150 million records of individuals leaked in France alone. So you can safely assume that your residential address is going to fall into the hands of criminals. Therefore, it may be a pretty good idea not to live, ironically, where your residential address is. You also may want to use throwaway phone numbers, throwaway email addresses. Assume that your identity documents have already been leaked, but just the idea of assuming that the data is going to be leaked, what do I want the criminal to see? What do I want him to think about me? And how does that isolate me personally from that? So very practically, just don't live exactly where your residential address is on the record, because everybody knows where you live.
Right.
Such an easy tip to implement. Yeah.
I want to jump back to something about starting small and steps. This is really important, certainly for the large-scale surveillance stuff, for the larger scale, the intelligence agencies and the Googles and the people like that. Doing small things matters a lot. Don't use Google. It's not the only thing there is. You can do 100 other things. If you don't, then this whole gigantic complex the amount of data they can get from you goes like this. And their ability to put big models together of what people are doing or even your life diminishes. Now, it's not going to go to zero because they buy from other people and there's all kinds of monkey business going on. The intelligence agencies do what they do. But the less they have, so when you get to the really scariest aspects of mass surveillance, those systems operate on a very thin margin. They're, the American intelligence is competing with, the whomever intelligence, and the other intelligence agencies and competing against them. The difference between winning and losing in those battles is 2 or 3%. It's not that much. So when you begin cutting back, a 3% difference may make like a 20% difference in the overall effectiveness of these things. It chops them down. So every little thing you do matters, which is why, again, I say, start small. Get don't use Google. Use a different search engine. Get your email somewhere else that at least cares about privacy. Use a decent VPN. 2 hops, please. Use a minimum of 2 hops. You can get it. It's not expensive. You can do it. Do not use the ones that are free, please. But things like that, it's may not sufficient for everything, but every little piece helps. So pick a spot and do something.
Yeah, we've now talked a lot about how you individuals can protect themselves. But I think what's even more important to talk about is how do we as builders, as creators, as producers, how do we help others while still staying private? So you guys got any tips on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I try to stay consistent with what I am preaching to the point where people are now telling me like, Rockstar, is mask really needed? Well, then I'm like, well, if I'm a cypherpunk and I'm preaching privacy and protecting my identity, sometimes it's harder to breathe. But this is nice area, like, AC is working on. So it's way easier than in Costa Rica, during Nostrica in the jungle. But again, like, I think you should be example, like, live up to your own standards and then help others as well. I love when I talk with people on what they can do to protect their privacy and still have successful career, like accomplish things. To me, that's the biggest thing. And what Paul, you said about not using Google, not using Gmail, I say also use Gmail, but use it for 30 days or have some kind of archiving where you're taking that data off the public servers and taking it onto your own private archive. Because once you start doing that, good things will happen. The success that I've had in Bitcoin, there is no way I would have that success if I weren't taking my privacy as seriously as I did. And because every piece of you that's somewhere else, that's publicly available, it is kind of like a chain that pulls you in that direction. And if there are so many chains around you and you're just being tugged, there is this post on LinkedIn, there is this post on Facebook, there is this, this person has my name, has my identity. Like, you will not be able to go towards where you're supposed to go. So privacy really is a key that fortifies your freedom. And that's where I'm really coming from. That's like, I really want people to understand that, because for me, it's been life changer. And I can't imagine my life in any way different than what it currently is.
If you're a cypherpunk and you're building apps, the mindset should be privacy by default, always. And again, going back to this theme, I think that we're coming to, which is all these little steps. Like, I develop a Bitcoin wallet, and a lot of people think about like a privacy wallet as being like, it does CoinJoin. CoinJoin's great. It's a core part of a privacy wallet, but a privacy wallet is actually the combination of very small decisions, a lot of very tiny decisions which accumulate to you being privacy. And that can be something like the way that you collect logs. You know, for example, one thing that we did is like instead of using Sentry, we built our own self-hosted Sentry server, push notifications. As a wallet builder, you're like, I want to be able to notify my user when they receive some money. We don't do push notifications, even if that's it makes the wallet a little bit less easy to use. All sorts of ways, all sorts of little things. And then when you're receiving information from someone, given the gravity of the consequences of data leaks, they are trusting you with their lives sometimes. And custodying someone's data is almost as risky as custodying someone's money. And the reason why I never wanted to be a custodial company or custodial exchange is because I don't want to have that stress. I don't want to have that risk. I don't want you to put. I don't want to be responsible for your life. I want you to be responsible for yourself. So it's just if you're building something and you want to truly be a cypherpunk, just don't take too many shortcuts, right? Don't sacrifice privacy for a little bit of convenience. And I see a lot of builders that try to take shortcuts and they don't respect the cypherpunk ethos. They think that it's going to give them more users, but in the long run, it hurts you. Like I know that for a fact because like we have as a company taken the step to do as little compromise as possible, and that has created us like a good reputation, which means in the long run we end up outcompeting all these companies that make a lot of compromise.
Yeah, I might have like I don't know the correct answer right now because things are changing. And what I've noticed, okay, first of all, you can be a developer nowadays and you could be fully pseudo-anonymous and you can do great stuff and no one's gonna not use your stuff because you're a pseudo-anonymous, right? And especially with AI, you can, if you don't like a tool, you can just make your own tool, right? Just say, I want this tool to exist so that I could do such a thing in a way. And all the complicated workflows that when you're trying to keep your online identity at arm's reach from your personal identity just go away because you've made a pipeline that just handles the whole thing. So I'd say for a young developer starting out, you could easily just go pseudo-anonymous and do really cool stuff. Now, the other thing that I have noticed though is if you do things that are going to get you targeted, those things, and you are trying to hide your identity, it seems that actually in practice that can be a bad combination. People, if you make an attempt to hide your identity, but then it gets leaked or something, they may come at you harder for doing that. There's people in Singapore doing this thing called Hyperliquid, and they are doing $1 trillion turnover, but they have LinkedIn profiles so they don't get arrested. So I don't know.
Yeah. We're almost out of time. Paul, you have 5 seconds. Inspire the builders.
Go ahead and be weird to your neighbors and to your family. They're going to be a little bit afraid. They're not really angry at you. They're angry because they're uncomfortable with something new and different. Give them time. Give them space. Do what you're going to do. Smile, and they'll come around.
Thank you very much for listening.